I'm going to turn to yet another point of view on this. Joining me now is Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders, who has a little bit of a dimmer view on the strike against Syria. Senator Sanders joins me now from Burlington, Vermont. Welcome back, sir.
Good to be with you.
So explain why you were against this strike.
Well, Chuck, for a start, let's all recognize that in a world full of disgusting dictators, Bashar Assad maybe ranks at the top. This is a guy, in order to hang on to power, has allowed 400,000 people in his own country to be killed and millions to be displaced. Our goal long term has got to work with countries around the world. We cannot do it unilaterally. We've got to work with countries around the world for a political solution to get rid of this guy and to finally bring peace and stability to this country, which has been so decimated. I do not believe, to answer your question, that the president simply has the authority to launch missiles. I think he has got to come to the United States Congress. I think he has got to explain to us what his long-term goals are. Chuck, let me just say this. Maybe the most important vote that I have ever cast in my life as a member of Congress was against the war in Iraq. When we get sucked into a war, we do not know the unintended consequences. It is easy to get into a war than it is to get out of a war, as we have learned now over the last 15 years in the Middle East.
Is there a point where humanitarian a cause sort of trumps that? You know, where you see the gassing of people? Is there a point where America's moral authority is being challenged here and you have to send a military message because no one else is going to do that and nothing else will deter Assad? Do you ever believe there's a moment like that?
What we are seeing in Syria is the disintegration and the destruction of an entire country. It is horrible beyond horrible. Yes, I mean, what can we say about somebody who gasses men, women, and children in his own country? It is disgusting beyond words. But what we have got to do is be smart and figure out what is the rational solution. Is putting 50 missiles into Syria going to solve that problem? At the end of the day, in my view, we have got to learn about what the war, the failure of our efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan, not repeat them, understand that it will be diplomacy, demanding that Russia, demanding that Iran sit down at the table with the rest of the world and help us solve this problem.
They've been calling for that for 3 years now. There's been this, you know, the talks in Geneva. Then Secretary of State John Kerry kept going back to the table. The Russians and the Iranians don't look like they're interested in a diplomatic political solution here.
Look, Chuck, you're right. Chuck, you're right. Look, this is an extremely complicated and difficult issue. But I can also tell you that we have been in war in Iraq and Afghanistan for 14 years. Thousands of American soldiers have died. The whole Middle East has been thrown into an uproar, massive instability. You know, all that I'm saying here is that we have got to be clear about what our goals are, not do it unilaterally, and understand also, may I say, that when we have a collapsing middle class and 28 million people without any health insurance and an infrastructure that needs $1 trillion of repair, that maybe we don't want to throw trillions of dollars more into unending perpetual warfare in the Middle East.
You know, in December of 2015, you called for more diplomacy, working with the Russians, and said, in fact, you said, you know, look, I am more than aware of the political differences we have with Russia today, but our job is to bring together a coalition which understands that the primary function right now is to destroy ISIS, to push aside for the moment at least other differences of opinion. Now, back then, you were a proponent of, hey, we have to prioritize the ISIS situation first in Syria. Has your mind changed on that, watching what Assad's been doing?
Assad has been doing what he has been doing for years. Chuck, 400,000 people in Syria have been killed, men, women, and children. Over 5 million people have been displaced. This is a horror show. Yes, we have got to destroy ISIS. Yes, we eventually have got to get rid of Assad. But we cannot, in my view, do it unilaterally. That will not work.
What do you do to the Russians, though, if they're not going to be at all interested in a political solution? How do you encourage them to the table?
I think you may want to make them an offer they can't refuse, and that means tightening the screws on them, dealing with sanctions, telling them that we need their help. They have got to come to the table and not maintain this horrific dictator. None of this stuff is easy, Chuck, and any position that anybody takes can be criticized. But at the end of the day, I think getting the United States involved in perpetual warfare, sending troops into Syria will just continue the process of money going down a rat hole. I think ultimately the solution has got to be political. And by the way, one of the things that I concerns many people, all right, is Trump says one thing and he ends up doing another thing. Let's get some consistency from this president. Let's get the Congress involved in this debate.
All right, Senator Bernie Sanders, the independent progressive from Vermont. Senator, thanks for being on the show, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. A lot of perspectives on Syria these days. So the political fallout from what happened in Syria this week, that'll be next with the panel. And later, there's nothing new about a White House power struggle, but the one we're hearing about in the West Wing involving Chief Strategist Steve Bannon and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, could actually have profound impacts on domestic and foreign policy. Stay with us.